Community Consolidated District 46 Board Meeting for Wednesday, February 7th, beginning at 6:02 p.m. this evening here at Frederick School. I need a roll call to order, please.
Mack.
Here.
Braden. Here. Nash. Not here. Albert.
Here.
LaCroix.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Weedman.
Here.
Harris. Here. And Mayerson.
Very good. Welcome to our two board members for this evening. We have established quorum. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I need a motion to approve this evening's agenda, please, which also includes the personnel addendums that came out before, but that's coming up with the consent agenda, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll repeat that. I'm out of order.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Miller.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Albert.
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
And LaCroix.
Aye.
Very good, thank you. Do we have any public comments at the moment for the front end of the meeting? No, we don't. Okay. Okay, I'd like to welcome our presentation for this evening, which are the Park Campus Leaders of the Pack, who I have as Annabelle, Julia, Samantha, Kaylee, Violet this evening. Is that correct? Okay.
Take two. Hello, Board of Education, Dr. Glickman, Mrs. Gluck, and the D46 staff and community. Thank you for inviting us back to discuss our progress thus far and what our future plans hold.
Leader of the Pack consists of students in 7th and 8th grade working to help with school activities, building a sense of community, and helping to foster a positive learning environment.
Park Campus has been involved in many activities. Leader of the Pack has been involved in many activities at Park Campus. For example, Winter Wonderland, Spirit Days, Donut Days, teaching PBIS lessons, and filling paw print orders.
Some upcoming events we are doing this year for Leader of the Pack are PBIS lessons, kindergarten meet and greets for new students, filling paw print orders, trimester activities for the students based on the PBIS lessons, trimester-based SEL or social emotional lesson themes, assisting at assemblies, and helping run events including concessions, ticket sales, and games.
Leader of the Pack has given us the opportunity to meet with different staff members and work with them on different activities. Park Campus staff has used our input to make Park Campus a better place. We look forward to continuing to work on different projects and activities throughout the year.
We would like to thank the Board of Education, Dr. Glickman, Ms. Gluck, Mr. Malamed, Mrs. Morales, and the D46 community for allowing us this time to share with you our celebrations and our upcoming plans for Park Campus.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much for a wonderful presentation and update this evening. This brings us to the board reports for the evening, and we will begin with our student representatives to the board this evening. They can share their board reports at the table for this meeting.
Park Campus. Thank you. Park Campus is full of excitement for the month of February. 5th through 8th graders have the opportunity to participate in Hunger Games this Friday. Our musical Annie is set to kick off in the first weekend of March. And our band and choir students are preparing for IGSMA. IGSMA stands for Illinois Grade School Music Association.
Our K through 4th grade students continue to shine in their classrooms. They just finished celebrating 100 days of school and had a great time learning all about the number 100, such as how many different ways to make 100. Students are working hard, starting interventions, following champs, and finally getting outside for recess with the warmer weather. Park Campus continues to work on SEL lessons as well as a monthly theme lesson. This month, we are focusing on managing stress and anxiety with short video clips and using engagement structures to communicate.
Wonderful. Thank you for that update on the board reports from our 2 student board representatives this evening. It is much appreciated. We'll continue going down this way. Mrs. Albert?
I don't have much to report, just a reminder that the foundation tickets for Barnfest, the early bird pricing is ending soon. And then Mrs. Braden and I recently attended the legislative dinner for EdRed, and all of the legislators there spoke about evidence-based funding being a #1 priority. So,
Ms. LaGroy? Okay. Mrs. Braden?
Mine is also about the legislative dinner and really a great opportunity to meet with our representatives and just kind of hear their perspectives on a number of issues. And that was definitely top of mind for them in terms of educational funding. And then Mrs. Albert and I have also talked about the 2 of us meeting with each of our representatives as they are just getting engaged, or our representative and our senators, they're just getting engaged in the spring legislative session. And so if, as we start to think about just having a more personal conversation with them, if there's any issues that are on board's mind or administration's mind that you'd like us to bring to them, we'd be happy to. And a bit of a look forward. In December, a couple of representatives from Moms Demand Action for Gun Violence Prevention met with Dr. Glickman and me to talk about what we could be doing at a district level to further emphasize gun safety and gun violence prevention. So I had a conversation with one of the board members at Warren Township High School about a resolution that they had passed about gun violence prevention and gun safety. And so that's something that I'm going to ask to be put on an upcoming agenda. I've got some sample resolutions for a topic for us to discuss. What is the what kind of stance would we like to take on gun violence prevention? And that definitely impacts school safety, student safety. So more to come, but it was a great conversation with that board member. So more to come.
Just 2 quick updates. The next CEDAW Governing Board meeting is on March 6th, so I'll have an update after that meeting. And just a quick update from the IASB Executive Board. They are putting together a slate of speakers coming up for the next dinner, which I believe is also in March, I think, which I would encourage all of us to sign up for again and make sure we attend those. They're going to be inviting the state superintendent back again because he was not able to make it the last time. We also are going to be, I'm advocating for speakers on sustainability and renewable energy at some of the future dinners. So we're looking, hopefully, I can get into their ear for either the upcoming fall dinner or the following spring dinner. So that's part of the discussions that I'm having on that executive team right now. And that's it for me.
Thank you. So for me, Ms. Mrs. Braden, Chrissy, I'm going to respond to your question about for the legislative session, and Mrs. Albert too, that apparently there's new legislation that's being floated for TIF reform. So that caught my eye and just thought we might want to learn more about what's going on with that. I believe it's Senator Gillespie from Arlington Heights, that bill.
I think it's directly related to the Bears Stadium.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. Yep. Okay, I have several thank yous. First to Mrs. Pelsor for your work engaging Digital Red. I don't know if you caught this at the last meeting. In the equipment disposal part of our agenda, I wanted to know more about that, and so connected with Amanda about Digital Red, and they have, they're the company that we use to recycle our Chromebooks, I believe. And they have a zero land waste policy that keeps things like lithium batteries and precious metals and other toxic waste out of our landfills, which has a direct impact on all of our health. So wanted to thank you for that. That's a conspicuous part of how we're handling our electronics. Very much appreciate it. Also, Roberto, wanted to thank your staff. I noticed there was quite a bit of overtime in the financial reports. So thank you to you and your guys for continuing to put in all this extra time, and that extends to all staff, of course. I wanted to thank Dr. Diaz and Claudia Martinez Arana, if I said that correctly. They attended the Community Engagement Committee meeting this week and gave us an update on what's going on with our newcomers. Really, it's an hour-and-a-half meeting, and that's a significant amount of time when there's a lot of other tasks, additional tasks on your plate. So thank you for that, for being there and helping us understand how we can connect with our impact community more effectively. And finally, to the Community Engagement Committee members, specifically at Woodview and Avon. I don't know if you're aware, but they've collaborated with Mrs. Schultz and have won several grants to help with their outdoor classrooms. Avon now has native plants and seeds, that some of which came from Woodview, so it's kind of nice to see that growing around the district. But they've also got play structures that support both gross motor play and imaginary play, which is important to kind of even that hierarchy out on playgrounds so that kids can recreate in a variety of different ways. And that goes to, on the far end of gun violence prevention, as there is a larger chance that every kid will feel like he or she belongs or they belong in our buildings. So I want to thank them for that too. That's it.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Glickman.
Thank you, Dr. Mack. I really want to thank our students from Park Campus. It was a really nice report, and I particularly appreciated that you focused on social emotional learning activities that you're doing at your school. I get the opportunity to see that kind of work throughout the district in all kinds of classrooms in all kinds of ways. One of the structures that we've been using this year are class meetings, and I've had the chance to be in classrooms when class meetings are happening, and it's just such a great way to set the day for students. And I actually was at Park the other day when I was in a classroom when they were doing a class meeting, and there was a space set aside for students who just needed a little bit of a break. And it was a very nicely organized space with fidgets for kids to use and maybe a place to draw, and a pass that was created by a student that said only use it if you need it. So it was really lovely to see how well we are training our students to recognize what they need and then to get what they need. So I wanted to mention that, and thank you for kind of teeing me off to make that kind of a comment. The rest of my report is about Grays Lake Middle School. I'm sure you're not surprised, board, to hear that. I think doing otherwise would kind of be burying the lead, right? So you've all seen the information that was shared out today. This is brand new information. We received it late yesterday, that we are looking at roughly 12 more weeks before our students and staff can get into Grays Lake Middle School and resume their learning there. The good news is we have a wonderful facility that we're able to use through that time. We are working with that facility to talk about any hurdles that we might have in terms of programming, and we continue to think through how we're using our space, and continuing to consider if there are changes that we can make to how we use our space. But back to those 12 weeks, it's really due to the amount of work that's needed and very specifically the supply chain issues. So board, I wanted to mention that to you. I don't think I wrote about that in my update, but I'm happy to share publicly. Although the work is extensive because it includes fixing unit ventilators, replacing all the fire sprinklers in that building, replacing the large gym floor, and then all of the cleanup, right, associated with the damage and that work that is to come. Some of that work, much of that work could be done much more quickly if it weren't for supply chain issues. And we've all kind of, if we've ever done work in our homes or our businesses, we might know that that is an issue, particularly now. My understanding is that it's the coils that are most difficult for us to come by. And our contractors that we're working with continue to tell us that they are working, well, they're working around the clock too, not around the clock, but they also are putting in overtime and working weekends to do things as quickly as possible, but there is this supply chain issue that they have to deal with. And any hurdles that we have to do in that building, because there are a couple that we're looking at, and we're working with the folks over at the University Center along with some outside entities regarding the use of space. But any hurdles that we have, we know we can overcome, because we did so last week very quickly when we took our students over to Lake County Tech Campus and College of Lake County. Hopefully people were able to see some photos. There were tons of them on Facebook. Thank you for that so much, Leslie. And there are photos in today's newsletter that went to all families. So if you didn't see them on Facebook, please take a look at what we have in that newsletter. It was a wonderful opportunity for our children to learn about CLC and to also be in the Tech Campus space as well. We are so grateful to our community, and I spoke about that in a more formal way at our last board meeting. But informally, I want to share that we are incredibly indebted to all of these entities who just keep saying yes. What can we do? As recently as for today and tomorrow, and I believe one day after that, when we, our students who are taking access testing at our GMS students, our 7th and 8th graders who need to take the access test, there was no space to do that in University Center. So Tech Campus was incredibly gracious and opened their doors to us again today and tomorrow and Friday as well. And our students are walking across and using that space again. So thank you to everybody for their patience and understanding as we continue to think through what our extended time looks like. This is brand new information that's important for people to hear, and we're going to continue to think through if there are any changes to our programs that we can make. And that's the end of my superintendent's report tonight.
Thank you very much, Dr. Glickman. That brings us to the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda. And this time, this is where we include the personnel addendum report that was sent to us earlier today.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
and Weedman.
Aye.
Okay. We do have a few action items to go through tonight. These were presented previously. The first one, I need a motion to approve the architectural services proposal with Wold Architects for health and life safety improvements.
I'll move.
Second.
Any additional comments or questions? Nope. Okay.
Weedman,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
and Albert.
Aye.
Motion approved. The next one is a motion. I need a motion to approve the student fees for fiscal year 2024-2025 as discussed.
I'll move.
And, hold on, yeah, okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Second. I'll second. Mr. Wildman has a comment.
Yeah, real quick. The administration is making a recommendation that the early bird discount for July 15th, that was actually what we've actually used as the previous deadline for registration technology fees, be revised to March 31st in order to encourage families to register as early as possible and thus assisting with district planning.
May 31st.
May 31st.
Sorry, May 31st.
May
Sorry, did I say
31st.
that? July
Yes.
15th, changing to May 31st.
Yeah.
May 31st.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wellman. Okay, okay.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
and Weedman.
Aye.
Okay, motion approved. And finally, I need a motion for the approval of the contract award for roof replacement at the Avon Center School.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yep.
First. Mr. Ochoa, I just want to confirm, I know you've confirmed this a few times, but with the change in vendor, are we still looking at a white roof?
So with this, they're going to go with EDM, which is basically a different material than the other material that's, I believe it's TPO, which is the white, because of the elevation of it in the small areas. You'll be able to see it from the street, which is really going to create an eyesore. And the price would be higher if they decide to go that route. The recommendation from Wold at that point was that it doesn't make a significant impact for us to do that. So we are not going to go that route because the rest of the roof system is shingles, and it's only those tiny areas that I believe it was 4 small areas that are going to be that EDM material.
Okay, I still need a motion.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay.
Albert,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
and Weedman.
Aye.
Okay, that completes our action items for this evening. Moving us along to the unfinished business portion, which is a referendum update. Dr. Glickman.
Yep. I just have a brief update for you. This week, we had a community meeting. Was it this week? Yes. Over at Park Campus on Monday. We still have quite a few community meetings scheduled. So any community members who would like to come and learn about the needs of the district and the reason why the board has put a referendum on the March 19th ballot have plenty of opportunities to read to come and learn about it and read about it as well. This Friday, there is a meeting right here at Frederick. That is an MPAC meeting. So it is for families of our multilingual learners. The meeting will be, the presentation will be done in Spanish, but we will have English interpretation as needed. Then at Prairie View on February 12th at 6:30, all of these are at 6:30, we'll have another meeting. Woodview is happening at 6:30 on February 20th, and Meadowview on February 28th. For people who are more visual learners, there's tons of information on our website. There's also another mailer that will be mailed out soon with information about the needs of the district. That includes, by the way, an explanation of the ballot question, because as we all know, ballot questions are very complicated. They are written in, forgive me, legalese. Just difficult to understand, and so it's been broken down to explain to people what the ballot question really means. And that is it for the referendum update. So while Mrs. Gluck is going up to the podium to get ready to present about the standardized assessment, I will share that when I was over at Park this week talking with our student representatives, I said to them, hey, there might be things that you might want to comment on. And I didn't think that you two really wanted to comment on the contract award for roof replacement at Avon Center School, right? Probably nothing to say about that, maybe not. But this one, you might have something to say about, because this is about the kinds of tests that you take. This is the kind of tests we take every spring that we're required for you to take. So if it turns out you have comments to make after Mrs. Gluck is finished, I am sure that the board would love to hear them. Okay? And if you don't, they'll understand that as well. Okay.
Very good. We're going to the standardized assessment overview. Mrs. Gluck.
Yeah, thanks. Good evening. I'm happy to share our standardized assessment overview today. This is going to really focus on our learners. For the most part, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what they've achieved, but it's also about creating equity, because as we look at our next steps as well, we're looking at how are we supporting all of our learners within our classrooms, and how are we cultivating our community in order to represent who we are. We have 3 outcomes that we have today. The first is to review the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, or as most people know it, IAR. We're going to look at our data by grade level. We're then going to also look at our data by demographic student groups in order to see over time what that looks like longitudinally. And then we're going to look at what are some of our next steps. So as you know, the Illinois School Report Card, we are given school designations, and these are the designations that are provided to us. We have exemplary, commendable, targeted, and comprehensive. In CCSD 46, I'm excited to share that all of our schools continue to be exemplary and commendable. So I'm going to show you those now. Here we have, you can see we have 2 schools that are exemplary, Park East and Woodview School. And then the rest of our schools are commendable. And again, that is great. We want exactly where we want to be. So I want to talk a little bit about IAR, the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, and what that means. What does that look like? So it's broken down as we're looking at this. It's giving us some information based on our standards. So this assessment itself aligns directly to the Illinois standards for ELA and math. And those questions are broken down in a way that students are providing answers either in a multiple choice format or in an extended response. So it's getting into some of that deeper critical thinking as well as just a multiple choice assessment. The administration of it is provided, it is a digital format for our students, and so it's all, they all use their Chromebooks. That changed over time. It used to be paper, pencil, now only if you need that accommodation do you get that. So it's no more filling in bubbles, as some of you might remember. And then scoring and reporting, we're able to receive those reports, and those are also going out to families, so you can see where students fall as far as proficiency ratings. So what is it measuring? So we're looking at test items that were developed by Illinois educators. And what they did is they took some time to align those items directly to what's happening in the classrooms, because our classrooms are focused on Illinois state standards, and so is the assessment. So it's assessing really, how are our students doing in relation to those standards. There's a common scale so that we can engage in some deeper dialogue and look at what does that look like over time for our students, and have those same conversation with families as well. And then again, it's looking at that full online assessment that we're providing our students. That gives us faster results too. So there are 5 performance levels. We are looking at proficiency. We're looking at levels 4 and 5. So 4 is that we've met those expectations, that students have mastered those standards. A level 5 is that they've exceeded those expectations. So when we're looking at proficiency on some of these next slides, it's the percentage of students with those 2 levels combined. And then again, we have the level 3 is where they're approaching those, and then level 2 is partially met. Level 1, students haven't met those expectations yet. So I want to give you a little just timeline and history of our state proficiency data. Park was prior to 2019, and so the Illinois report card until this school year had included some of that data that was because we hadn't been taking IAR long enough. So now the Illinois report card starting this year just starts with 2019 because they feel like we've been taking that assessment for a long enough period of time to look at that data. So in 2019 is when we started IAR as a state, In 2020, you may remember, we did not take IAR because of COVID. We were in remote learning. And then in 2021, the test was optional for school districts. We, as a district, had approximately 30% of our students participate in that assessment. 2022, we had a full participation rate, and last year, we had a full participation rate. So you can see some of this. The reason this is relevant is you can see some of this within our data. So let's start to dig into that grade level data. So you can see here, all of these sides have ELA on the left and math on the right. The red is the state, that red column for each of those, and the blue is the district. So you can see here, we have an upward trend in our proficiency, and we at third grade continue to be above the state proficiency as well. Fourth grade is a similar pattern. So you, again, can see that upward trend. You can see in all of these a drop from 2019 to 2021. That was state, that happened across the state, and again, that's because we had lower participation rates. When we look at fifth grade, you still see that upward trend, and we're still above the state. You notice that there's a little bit closer for literacy in fifth grade, and so that's something that those are the kinds of things that we look at and then start to make instructional decisions based on some of that data. And we'll talk about next steps and what we're going to do with this data in a little bit. When we look at sixth grade, again, you'll see that upward trend in literacy, and I just want to pause also to point out and remind you that last year was a big year for literacy in our district because we had new implementation of our literacy resource. So to see the growth from between and all the way up from 2022 to 2023 is really important and helps us to monitor our new resource. So you'll notice that. You'll also notice that we do have slight increase in proficiency in math in sixth grade, but it's starting to mirror and match where the state is at. Seventh grade, you'll notice that we are slightly below the state, however, in literacy and ELA. However, you will notice the huge jump from 2022 to 2023. So I think that's something that we need to celebrate, that we're continuing to make that growth. And then you see that same trend for math that we saw in sixth grade. And in eighth grade, we saw, it's again the same thing. We still continue to see that growth in ELA. And math, there is a larger gap last year in eighth grade math. So that is something that we are spending some time looking at. And you'll notice in our next step some things that GMS specifically is doing in the area of math. And those are conversations we're having about interventions and what does that look like for instruction. So I want to break this down a little bit more for demographic breakdowns and looking at our student groups. So what we have here, and this is a little bit of a busy chart, but it gives you a lot of information. So what you'll notice is each of those colors in the key shares a different student group or a different demographic that we have within our district. What you can see again over time is you can see where we were in 2019, dropped 2021. Again, that's the year that it was partial participation. But then we started to grow last year, and you can see we grew even more in all of those demographic areas in 2023. So that is it, and I would say that that has to do with our focus on instruction with an equity lens last year that we began to have conversations about. And then this is the same for math, and again, you will notice that we have, all of those different colors are growing, and we see some growth there. There's one, then that is the Asian population is slightly lower. And when I looked at the number of students that fell in that category, it was smaller, so I'm not sure that's something we're looking into as well. So what does this mean? We take all this data and we get to make some decisions instructionally and how to use all of this. So we're continuing to have that focus on instruction and planning through an equity lens. We saw that that made a difference, and so we're continuing to have those conversations. We're continuing to work in our content-alike teams. So if you remember on our late start days, we have what we call job-alike teams, which are content-alike. And during those meetings, we're having continued conversation about what our guaranteed and viable curriculum is for all students. So that's what are all students receiving in content areas, no matter what school you're in, if you're in the same grade level, in order to ensure that all of our students are receiving access to the same instruction. Those conversations are related to instructional standards, practices, and also looking at assessment so that we can continue to monitor student growth over time. In addition to that, we're spending a lot of time focusing on results at the building level through team discussions. We're having conversations about both school assessments as well as district level assessments, and looking at that data in order to make instructional decisions. So how do we look at different student groups and determine how to determine interventions that we're providing students, determine instruction in a classroom at the tier 1 level, so at the whole class level, thinking about small group instruction, what can teachers be doing to support our students' learning? We have school and district level goal areas that are focused on continued improvement. And so I have an example up here, and you will notice that for this one, when we're talking about measuring performance ranges or looking at students moving up at least one performance range as measured by IAR, and you notice that it's that 26th to 60th percentile. That group is typically that group that's falling in that level 3. So those are our students that we want to look at. How are we getting them in order to that proficiency? So it's not that we're ignoring the others, but really in this particular case, that was a larger group of students in that school, and so they wanted to, in a particular grade level, and they wanted to have some conversation about how are we ensuring that we're moving those students up to a proficiency range. And then another example here is during intervention time at grades like middle school, which they call WIN, which is what I need time. And all of our students have access to this, and this is a clear intentional focus for them right now on math, which is why I said when we looked at that 8th grade data, they've really put this focus on math this year. So they are increasing, the math teachers in particular are moving from classroom to classroom during that WIN time in order to ensure that students are getting reteaching or small group instruction in order to really understand their tier 1. And then in addition to that, we have a math planning and design team, a PDT, that is focusing on standards and district level resource. So our math resource our contract is up at the end of the 24-25 school year. And so that is something that we are looking at, is it meeting our needs of our students? So, as I shared, I was going to talk about our IAR data by grade level, by demographic group, and then talk about next steps. So that leaves me to questions.
Can I start with the student board members first, if they have any comments? Yeah. I do welcome our student board members this evening to start with any questions or comments they might have, if you have any at all.
No? All right.
If you
don't have to.
If you think of any, I can come back to you as well. Yep. They're chatting. We'll let them chat. Yeah.
All right.
You chat, and I'll come back. Okay, Mrs. Miller.
So I might catch you off guard a little bit. So again, if it's fine to come back to this later, but I'm curious demographically if you looked at or we looked at the difference in achievement. So I'm looking at the achievement gap for boys and girls. I know we did it by race, but by boys and girls.
Yeah, we can look at that. I haven't looked at it in a little while, so we can look at what that looks like. If I'm remembering correctly, it wasn't too far off, but let me look at it again, and I can send you an answer to that.
It sounds like staff has been embracing looking at the data, and I was just curious, do you find that to be the case across the whole district and really honing in on the data and looking at those middle groups like you were talking about?
Yeah, so I can say this work started before I got here, so thank you to the people that were in this seat prior to me getting here. I think it's good practice, right? So we are having the conversations at the school level, but then also bringing them into those job-alike teams and having those conversations about what does this mean for our instruction, and really looking at then how do we support our students. I think it's an area that we always can continue to grow as we're looking at analyzing data, and so that we're looking at what our best practices in order to support that.
Is it possible for parents to have access to some of this if they wanted the information to help with tutoring or any other outside school supports?
Yeah, so are you talking IAR specifically?
That
Or even just ongoing data from the classroom member?
So I may or may not have needed information on one of my children, and it was really helpful to have the bullet points. I don't remember which test it was from, but then I could go to, if I needed to do that, I could have gone, or maybe did go to someone else and say, hey, we need work on these points.
Yeah, so IAR gives you the information. I like to call it a little bit more of autopsy data, right? They take the assessment in April, and then we get the data in August-ish, end of July, maybe sometime September, depends when the state sends it out. It still gives you that information, it's just a little bit delayed. NWA MAP assessment, we send out on a regular basis 3 times a year, and that gives you, I think, what you're talking about with those bullets.
Braden?
I know there's sometimes can be misinterpretation of the percentages that get posted on the report card in terms of a pass-fail. And I know that's not what this is at all, but I thought it might be helpful if you could kind of talk about how you look at those scores compared to maybe as a pass-fail, especially the ones that are about meeting expectations.
Yeah, so when we're looking at these, are you talking pass-fail, the grade level versus, right? So again, this is one data point for our students, and so I think it fits into a puzzle that you look at in order to know how is a student performing. And it's, again, we get the data. It's not data you can act on immediately on, like, when there's formative assessment happening in a classroom on a daily basis and teachers are gathering information, and even when I'm talking assessment, it's not just a test, right? It's the interactions that teachers have with students when they're meeting with them, when they're listening to a discussion or engaging in discussion with students. It's the work they're doing on a daily basis. That's the work that helps us to better understand the growth of a student and the proficiency that they're at.
And I think I say this every time you present on this, but to me, that's the expertise of this profession, and I really appreciate that broader view. I always appreciate when you bring that, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I got a couple questions for you. When you put up the data for 8th grade, and you have from 2019 to 2023, is that the same cohort over that same 3 periods, or is that 8th grade period?
It's 8th grade, period. So it was the 8th grade cohort in 2019, 8th grade cohort who are now, they are now
Right.
seniors. Is
Okay.
that my daughter? Yeah.
Yeah. my
I had
kid
to
too.
do the math in my head. Yeah, so so you're looking at different cohorts of students. We do look at, so I think what you're asking, do we look, right? So we do look at cohorts of over time as well. We'll look at how have our students done. We have this data for them from 3rd grade up through 8th grade.
Right, because at one point we talked about, and we did some interventions for learning loss right after we got back into kind of regular learning, right, after COVID. It'd be interesting to see, is that line still going up, or did we kind of plateau out from where they were, right? So
Yeah.
if they were at 45 or what it was, whatever the number is up there, in their 4th grade year, but they're now at 25 in their 8th grade year, where did we miss being able to catch them back up and push them farther? I think that would be, this is great, it shows you where we're at, but where are my kindergartens gonna be in 4th grade?
Yep.
And how well they were doing over their entire education period. To me, that kind of shows a much more progress, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and we can do that. We can pull that, we can manipulate the data in order to determine that.
And then the other question I had is, so they have these proficiency standards, right? Are those proficiency standards slowly raising up too, or have they been flat?
They've been flat.
Okay.
Yeah, so the standards haven't changed since they came out. I don't even remember when they came out now. It's been a while. So, yeah, when the standards haven't changed, they're the same.
Oh, yeah.
But we do, I will say, we do stop to have conversations about what those standards mean, and are we really still take on a regular basis to ensure that we're all still interpreting those standards in the same way, right? So the Illinois state standards have a lot of language in them. There's a lot of words. So we want to make sure that we're really understanding those in the same way.
So my question is, I'm sure this is something that is being worked on as part of the next steps, but it struck me when you were looking at the grade level data, in almost every one of these graphs, the 2019 section has a blue that is much bigger than the red.
Mm-hmm.
And I would expect as you progress through COVID and learning loss, I would expect all of them to go down. But it's clear to me from these graphs that the district's position relative to the state is gotten worse as you go from 2019 to 2023. And I'm wondering, how can I make sense of that, or how should I think of that?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. It depends on the grade level.
Okay.
And I think that is partially also why we are starting to have some conversation about the resources that we're using and what does instruction look like in the classroom. So we're looking at, our student population. The state is the state, right? We're looking, that's huge. But when we're talking about we care really about what's happening here and how do we get back to that level.
Has
So
there
we're
been
digging
any
into that.
change in how we approach preparing kids for the tests? Or maybe a different question or similar question asked differently is, how do we prepare
Good question.
kids for the tests?
Yeah, so best practice is not to stop and teach for the test. Best practice is to embed the types of questions that are on the assessment to within regular instruction and regular assessment. So actually, I was on a Northern Illinois Teaching and Learning meeting today, and we were just talking about this exact topic, and that is what we're looking at. So the state releases, they release assessment items and assessment questions, and we can look at that and say, okay, this is the type, and they tell us, we can look at which types of questions did students perform better on, or which ones might be an area that we need to look at. And so thinking about not only cohorts of students, but looking at specific grade levels, do we see patterns? Because I use a lot of this data to say, do we see patterns in different grade levels? And then how do we then mirror some of that in the classroom so that students are practicing that all along? We never want this to be a surprise, and we never want it to be the first time that they're being assessed in this way.
The commonality between the test and the curriculum, right, is the standards.
Yep.
But to your point, there's nuance in there.
Yep.
Okay.
And sometimes the state changes it and surprises us, and so we try to use that to learn and grow.
Thank you.
Okay. Alrighty, I'll move us along to our next item on the new business, network switch maintenance and support. Oh, sorry, I had to come back. Yes, I had to come back to the student representatives. My apologies. Thank you, Dr. Glickman.
Okay, so after some brainstorming thoroughly for some questions, we were wondering, me and Sammy, we were wondering if like the IAR test could be like one big test, kind of like how NWEA is, or like once we finish that test, like can we continue?
That is a great question. So the state gives us guidelines of exactly how it has to be administered. So I wish the answer to that was yes, but the answer is unfortunately no. So the guidelines for that is they tell us exactly how long of a period of time it is that we can take the assessment. And then they tell us exactly how many sessions we need to take. So they tell you 2 ELA sessions, each session is 60 minutes.
Okay, so, like, why can't you just have like one test, like be like a little bit longer and like the next one like shorter?
Yeah, I wish we could. So that, yeah, the state tells us exactly what we have to do, and we have to follow those rules. So that all the schools are taking it in exactly the same way. They even give your teachers like a script that they have to read to you before they give you the test, so that every teacher is saying the same thing. Great questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you, wonderful questions. Okay, the next item on new business is the network switch maintenance and support contract.
Yep, so as you know, we've made a lot of upgrades to our network infrastructure, both this summer and even back to December of 2022. And so what these maintenance and support contracts are for our network switches, which control how information moves and internet access gets to access points and phones and all kinds of important things that we need to run the schools. These contracts ensure smooth operation and maximize network uptime. They provide firmware updates, which protects us from a cybersecurity standpoint. They provide technical support for troubleshooting, and also there's hardware replacement guarantees. So, they're vital to keeping our networks both secure and safe and up.
Any questions or comments? Ms. Miller?
I'm all for keeping phones and internet working. And I also have a question about, it says in the memo that you wrote that this will be funded from federal E-funding. Could you tell us more about what if those funds are not available, or how does that work?
Yep, so E-rate is a federal grant program that we take advantage of that funded our wireless upgrade and a whole bunch of the switches actually that we're looking to cover with these maintenance contracts. That funding comes in a 5-year window, so a district gets an allotted amount of funding to spend over 5 years, however you choose. Not however, you have to follow the guidelines. Obviously, it's a grant. So we spent a significant, almost all of our E-rate money during that wireless and network project that we did this past summer. So that we are currently in year 4 of 5. We have a little bit of money that we'll probably use next school year. And so then we get re-upped. If that makes sense.
Okay. The next item on our new business list here was the press policy updates. The policy updates that we discussed at the earlier policy committee.
Yep, I can talk
Did you
about
go
that a
ahead?
bit,
Yep.
sure. Yeah, we had a policy committee meeting at 5 o'clock, and if you're looking at the agenda, you can see an extremely, excuse me, extremely long list of policies that were discussed at that meeting. They all come from press, which is the system that we use that makes recommendations to us in terms of what policies we should be looking at and when. Typically, those policies are updated due to changes in law, very often just footnote changes. Almost all of the policies on that very long list fit that description, so really no substantial changes to the policies for the most part. Again, it was a lengthy list, so there were 3 policies that the members of the policy committee wanted to go back to prior to the next board meeting, because at the next board meeting, the board will actually vote on the policies. So we will also have a policy committee meeting at 5 o'clock on February 21st, which is our next board meeting date. And I will share what 3 policies we're going back to. We'll go back to discuss, again, policy 460, which is purchases and contracts. We'll go back and talk about policy 7:60, which is residence, and policy 7:70, which is attendance and truancy. So those will be discussed again next time. That's all I have about that. Anybody have comments about the meeting, or, okay, great.
Okay, that brings us then to topics for future agenda items, which would include that probably.
Sure. Well, we'll be doing policy, so we'll start with policy committee meeting at 5 o'clock, and then policies will be up for approval as well. We will be doing our first look at the 24-25 school calendar. Dr. Diaz is going to do a presentation, correct, about asylum seekers. I think that was a request of the board at some point, and so she's going to be doing that on February 21st. Then Christy Braden, is the February 21st when you want to have gun safety resolution discussed? Okay. There is. And then I'll share I have one more agenda item that we could talk about on February 21st, but I did have another idea. So we were scheduled to do the discussion about the social media lawsuit, which, as a reminder, is about a number of school districts across the country coming together to join a lawsuit against a variety of social media companies in terms of, with the allegation being that the way the practices and policies of those companies are put forth is damaging to children. I will note that March 6th, we have student reps at the table, GMS student reps at the table. So I wondered if instead of discussing on February 21st, you want to discuss it on March 6th.
That would be great.
Okay, so we'll move that because I think we'd agreed it's not, well, the topic is urgent in terms of keeping our children safe is urgent, but whether or not this school board chooses to join that lawsuit is not urgent right now in terms of, that decision. Okay, so we will move that. Do you want me to move forward to let you know what we have coming up March 6th? Okay, let me just move this before I forget. Okay, so again, March 6th, we'll have student reps coming from GMS. I'm sure they'll have a lot to tell us about what their experiences are like right now over at GMS East. We have a composting presentation that night. We will have the school calendar approval. We'll do the social media lawsuit. I know there was a request to have conversation about whether the board wants to be moving forward with a board or a community sustainability committee. Is that something you want to have on the March 6th? Yes, okay. And the Woodview principal approval should be on March 6th as well. So those are the next two upcoming meetings. Oh, and I'm sorry, we'll just add as well. Sorry, we didn't close this loop, Dr. Woke and I today, but either one of those two dates, he'll be doing a staffing update as well. So, and that will be a staffing update in terms of our staffing plans for the 24-25 school year.
All right, thank you, Dr. Glickman. Public comments?
Yes, we have one, Liz Wixer.
Hi, I'm Liz Wixer, as all of you know. I'm here speaking specifically as a parent, not from D127, so I just want to make that clear. There's a couple things that I wanted to bring up regarding the situation with GMS and GMS East that I don't know how much of this information is filtering up to the board level, so I just wanted to put it all out on the table. One thing is there's a lot of conversations about how unhappy parents are with the complete lack of physical activity that's happening during the school day. So I've heard about it from a lot of people, and especially now that the due date for being able to even potentially move back into GMS is being pushed all the way out to the end of April, something else needs to get figured out. We need to figure out how to let kids get active and outside. I mean, these are students who were accustomed to going outside for gym class when it was nice outside. Something has to change. There's another piece, which is that the fine arts, it's like it just got chucked out the window, and the people who run the fine arts programs are trying to claw back some amount of time. And I understand there's a limitation on space and availability, but again, with this time period being pushed out, like it's like what, that's the reason some kids go to school, is so they can participate in fine arts or so they can go to gym class. And we're actively removing that from them. the other thing that I wanted to personally bring up is there was a lot of moving parts going into trying to make sure that everyone who was attending GMS was then also able to be bused over to GMS East because they weren't allowed to walk or bike there. As the weather warms up, that's starting to be a little bit less of an issue just because there are bike trails that go over there. But one opportunity that I think was a major miss was the PACE bus system, which serves a lot of our district. And there are options for the school to actually facilitate getting Ventra passes for students. That's done by Chicago Public Schools directly, but it is open to any school within the PACE bus arena. So that's just something I wanted to bring up, as we don't always need to be specifically hiring Durham to transport our students. There are other options that sometimes get ignored. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. I have a daughter who gets very car sick on school buses, so riding them is just not an option. So she's been taking the PACE bus home from CLC all the way home to the West Trail neighborhood. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an option. And I do appreciate that this was a huge project to get everybody transferred over in a week. And I just wanted to say I do appreciate all of the work that went into that. There's some other issues that are kind of like, if this was a temporary situation, we just kind of deal with it for a while, but it's looking like it may even go through the end of the school year. And so these are some other issues that really do need some attention and to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a closed session this evening, so I am going to read the items that we need to read to adjourn from the open session and into closed session. There will be no further action taken after the closed session is complete, so we don't anticipate anything coming out of that session. I do need a motion to go into closed session in order to discuss two items on the closed session list. Public Act 5 Illinois CS 120/2, appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. And additionally, Public Act 5 Illinois CS 120/2, paragraph C8, security procedures, school building safety and security, and the use of personnel and equipment to respond to an actual, a threatened, or a reasonably potential danger to the safety of employees, students, staff, the public, or public property.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
and Braden.
Aye.
Thank you very much for joining us this
Sorry.
evening, and special
We
thanks.
have two more.
One more,
I-
two more.
I apologize. Harris,
I'm going fast.
just say aye.
Aye.
And Mayerson. Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight.